I may be the queen, but I am calling this what it is. It's a royal shit show.
I've just about had enough of Andrea, David, and especially Joe, but I must admit that I quite like Richard. But still, it's a shit show, and it's time to just stop.
What would happen if everyone listened to Andrea, David, Richard, and Joe? What could happen if everyone listened to the shit show?
There are some things which are really dangerous. In fact, I lost my voice after all the screaming I was doing when I heard what they were saying on the shit show. They're the real threat we're facing.
I just like to say that I have never, ever tuned in, and I can guarantee that I won't be watching the shit show with Andrea, David, Richard, and Joe, but maybe I could write a song about David's book.
These guys can make a small, insignificant problem like an oil field on fire sound like it's a real shit show. They just exaggerate everything. They're fake news, and they're whiny. They're the real shit show.
Oh, I absolutely agree. It's a shit show. The important thing is that we approach it with joy, because then it's an uplifting shit show.
I remember the first time I heard the shit show. At least I think I remember. What are we talking about?
Oh, Joe. I don't know why Taylor Swift doesn't listen to us. All right, welcome to the shit show. My name's Andrea Edwards.
I'm Richard Basilotto, and this week you find me in the middle.
And my name is Joe Augustine. Welcome to the Shit Show. It's the only program where we track the polycrisis, which is a really fancy academic multi-syllabic way of saying everything's on fire, and that water you were expecting for the fire department, well, that's stuck in the Strait of Hormuz. Today's episode is titled Threatening Civilization Ain't Cool. Now, that's a bold stance, but, you know, we're an edgy show. We're navigating a world where the sitting U.S. president is on Truth Social casually promising the end of Persia, effectively treating the 3,000-year-old home of Rumi, algebra, and the world's first postal system like a plastic cup. But there is a silver lining to this potential nuclear standoff. It seems that while we couldn't save the turtles with paper straws or reduce, reuse, or recycle badges, the protection of corporate profits has given a boost to sustainable packaging. While the global supply chain for virgin plastic collapsing under the weight of Operation Epic Fury is causing all this, we're getting serious about our carbon footprint at last, perhaps. Who knows? We'll check in on the Pentagon, which is threatening the Pope with a 13th century French vacation. We'll explain. And we'll also talk about why 2026 is looking like the year where the climate finally hits Control, Alternate, Delete. It's a lot to take in. So grab a drink, use whatever straw you might use, because it doesn't seem to matter anymore. And it's going to be a long, perhaps recyclable show. And besides the three of us on today, and of course later on I think David might be trying to join us as well, we'd like to bring on an extra perspective on the show. So joining us is to make sense of things today is Andy Lopata. He's a man who's opened 25 years, or has spent 25 years helping organizations unlock the value of professional relationships. We'll be asking Andy about how to use his relationship matrix for troubling times. Presumably for, you know, those moments when you need to network your way into a fallout bunker, or perhaps to get someone to help you charge your phone. I don't know. Andy Lopata, Lopata. I hope I'm.
That's it, Lopata. Yeah, that's it.
Lopata, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I don't know how to follow that that introduction. All those amazing people and some less than amazing that you have following the shit show.
Yeah, Joe really enjoys AI. Can you tell?
Yeah, I'm impressed.
I'm not even here really right now.
Back to life is quite impressive in itself.
Anyway, Andy, it's really great to have you here. I've been nagging you for quite some time to try and convince you to come and join us. The 7 a.m. start wasn't appealing, but at least the 8 a.m. maybe, which just this week, right? It's 8 a.m.
Yes.
So anyway, it's good to have you here, mate. And we're going to talk to you about what you do. But before we do that, I wanted to, this for me felt like a week like no other, where, the words that we heard coming out of the President of the United States, apart from the potty mouth, what he actually meant by the threats, because there was only one possible way that you could annihilate an entire civilization, and that is obviously a nuclear bomb. So yeah, I know. I mean, was it Monday night here? I didn't sleep very well. I went to bed with Pete Hegseth in my head.
I'm glad you said it in your head.
But I was watching a video where that apparently he was going to be sacked, and I woke up and that wasn't the case. But at least there wasn't a nuclear war. Anyway, yeah. What about you guys? Paying attention, not paying attention, feelings.
You have to pay attention. You know, it's impossible not to, and you're trying to make sense of the holy assemblage of rumors, semi-facts, and semi-official statements. But at the end of the day, you actually don't know who is saying what and where the real power lies at the moment in Iran, which makes it very complicated. To me, it seems like the Revolutionary Guard has the ultimate say and control over matters, but you don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I know I can always rely on Richard to be the one to use the word assemblage. I have never heard that in regular conversation. I must admit, I want to say desperately short of time, but I think desperately short of attention that I put to the news. So I'm lucky enough to not spend that much time. This weekly update is when I catch up with the news, besides the comedy shows. So I've been largely unaffected by some of the details that I hear, can be quite troubling. Andrea, it's terrible. I mean, look, as the BBC like to say, other fantasies can be used as well. Have to have Pete Hegseth on your mind as you're going to sleep. I mean, that's a special kind of wrong.
Yeah, it definitely felt wrong. What about you, Andy? I know you pay attention to current affairs.
Yeah. The interesting thing is you say it's a week like any other. So it's not a week like any other, but I'm not sure it is these days. I mean, if you time traveled 10, 15 years from 10, 15 years ago to today, you wouldn't believe what we're seeing. But this has become our normality, and that's the danger. I think when things started going south a decade ago, we treated it as a bit of a joke. We treated Trump as a joke. And you still look at his press conferences and look at his truths. I mean, that alone, and you just sort of take them almost as satire and treat them. I went to see the producers in London last week, and it does remind me of all the great work of Mel Brooks and the satirists, the going back to Groucho Marx and Chaplin and the work that they did. It's come to life, but I think we were lulled into a false sense of bemusement, and we've stuck there. And what worries me, I do a little bit like Joe. I do follow the news. I don't typically watch the news, and when the news starts with 15 minutes of bombing, I just want to flick over. And I think we've become a little bit immune to it. It's every day now. And I've spoken in Iran, and I've spent time with people in Tehran, the ordinary people in Tehran, because I think the danger the trap we fall into is you hear the word Iran and you think everyone is crazy and everyone is a religious maniac, and that's not the truth. They are people like you and me who like to have fun, who want to have fun but aren't allowed to a lot of the time in public, who connect on a human level. I had so much in common with so many people I met there, and I've stayed friends. And I'm really worried about those people, and those are the stories we lose. The bit of the news I watched the other day was the bombing of Lebanon. And Lebanon has just become a word that represents something. But we forget that behind that word that represents something are people having their homes destroyed, their lives destroyed, their families ripped apart, people close to them dying. And because of this constant barrage, and it is every day, and it has been for 10 years, in one form or another, we've become immune to it, and that's what concerns me. So I don't think it is a week like a week unlike any other. I think it is like any other. That's where the problem lies.
Yeah, I suppose when I use that term, it's for a decade, every week it's just this madness, chaos, overwhelm, right? So I totally agree with that. But it's the stepping forward to a crazier place than we were even a week before that. And to me, this is a week where we step forward into uncharted territory from serious nuclear risk, right? With a person in charge who has the right and the ability to press a button or wherever they send them off. Like, he doesn't need anyone's permission, and we don't know if he's got the character to hold himself back. We don't. And that's the danger of this 10-year build-up. We don't know what he's capable of doing to save his own, whatever it is, his sense of self, we don't know. So I think that's where a lot of people who are really paying attention, there's an energetic sort of evolution that is happening. And I really felt it this week. Yeah, for sure.
It's also the people behind him. And
I think
there's a big difference between this administration and his previous administration.
Totally.
In that the nasty, the really nasty people with the really nasty agenda realized they weren't ready last time. And they've spent the last 6 years or whatever it's been getting ready. And those are the agendas that you need to be worried about, because I actually don't think Trump is in full control of what happens. I think there are people behind him, and they're going to be the ones that decide, and it's their agenda that we have to be worried about.
Yeah. It would have been better if he won the 2020 election and we got rid of him for this round, right? Rather than giving him that 4 years of preparation.
Would we have done? He's already talking about a third term.
Yeah.
So would we have done?
Yeah. But anyway, Andy, let's move on to you, and then we'll of course go back to the war and just sort of pull out some of the key things that have been happening. So
it's rare that I'm the light diversion in the middle of a conversation.
No, because we're going to apply what you do to the broader topic anyway. So no, it's all good. It's about giving our audience tools that they can use to get through this time. So, but before we do that, let's just tell us a little bit more about yourself.
I've been in the space of professional relationships, as Joe said, for over 25 years now, working to help people and organizations enhance the power of, we're in a world of AI, I'm more about HI, human interaction. And it's something that many of us do naturally. To different degrees of ability, but however good you are with creating connection and building relationships, if you are more thoughtful about it, and dare I use the word strategic about it, you're going to achieve more. You're going to achieve more in your career. You're going to achieve more in your role, and you're going to get the support you need more easily. And my job really is quite a tough one, in the sense that I take something that needs to be authentic and human and genuine, and turn it into something strategic and planned out and thoughtful, and to do that in a way that people don't feel networked by you. You might notice I haven't used that word networking, and that was really my entry point into this space. Unfortunately, networking has a lot of negative connotations, whether it's the perception of people exchanging business cards and elevator pitches over warm wine and cold canapes, or whether it's a feeling of being manipulated and being used for something. That's not what I'm about. I'm about building, nurturing, and leveraging really powerful professional relationships that we can support each other. So that's the work that I've been doing for over 25 years. And it will range from working with sales teams on generating referrals, working with leadership programs, helping move people forward into those leadership positions and create the networks they're going to need at that next level, helping people move forward with the next step in their career. And my last book was the Financial Times Guide to Mentoring. So it's going through to that piece about asking for help, asking for support. My fifth book was called Just Ask. So how do we access the support that people are happy to give us, but sometimes we're not as happy to ask for it for various reasons.
Yeah, networking, I always find it a really interesting one. Do you know my favorite networking question?
Go for
Well,
it.
it's actually not that relevant anymore because people don't read books. But I always ask people what books they like to read.
Yeah,
Because I find it just people go, oh, and they don't expect that.
No, because we're conditioned for people to ask us what we do, which is the networking equivalent that you come here often. You know, people aren't interested. It's an icebreaker, and they get into what I call the networking dance, where, you know, what do you do? Elevator pitch. Oh, what do you do? Elevator pitch. Nice to meet you. Here's my card. Bye. Let's connect on LinkedIn and forget who the other person is in a week's time.
And we can talk to each other with AI.
yeah, and you're breaking that. You're breaking that cycle, breaking that expectation. So you're creating a different conversation point.
Yeah. Oh, it's good. It really gets you into someone's psyche very, very quickly. All right. So Joe mentioned it, but you've designed something that you call the relationship matrix. So can you help us understand what that is? And then we're going to try and take it a little bit broader.
Yeah, of course.
You've got to mispronounce it the way I did it first, though. Matrix, the matrix.
Yeah. I need to highlight Andy.
It's an assemblage. It's an assemblage of a matrix.
Yeah. So the matrix is the one that you do in an old-fashioned smoking room with a gown. With my relationship matrix. Yes, so the relationship matrix in more day-to-day life, it's just taking a couple of my frameworks and building them into a traditional stakeholder mapping context. I have to say that I'd always heard of stakeholder mapping, never used it, developed the relationship matrix, thought this is probably stakeholder mapping, and then looked it up and realized it was. So I haven't created anything new in that sense, but it's the application. So where we're at the moment, I'll share what the matrix is and then where we're going with it, because that's really exciting me at the moment. So the relationship matrix is a stakeholder map. For those of you who haven't worked with a stakeholder map before, it's effectively a way to plot out who the key stakeholders are in anything that you want to achieve. So you select a specific objective. So let's say what your next role is going to be. And you identify the key stakeholder groups that can help you. So that might be the colleagues on your team. It might be the senior management team in the organization you work with. It might be key external stakeholders like your client groups. It might be other divisions within your organization. And you put in everyone you know or know of within that group. But the two frameworks that I mentioned that we build into it are the 7 stages of professional relationship. Moving away from seeing networks as binary, you're in my network or you're not, and understanding the journey people go on once they connect with us. So you move from people recognizing you to knowing you, liking you, trusting you, and then becoming a supporter, an advocate, or a friend. So you list them based on that 7 stages of professional relationship from the other person's perspective, how they see their relationship with you. And then you score each person there on my 4 eyes. And the 4 eyes is how people can help us. So are they influencers? Are they introducers? Are they implementers? Are they sources of information, insight, and ideas? So when you look at the matrix, once it's completed, you can quickly see the people who could help you, and you can see how they can help you and would help you. And you can ask yourself, are they giving me that help at the moment? And if not, what conversation do I need to have with them? You can identify the people who could help you and how they could help you, but maybe aren't ready to. And you can work out, how do I build the relationship from here? And then you can identify the people who could help you but don't know you. And you can look for your introducers to get the connection that you need. So when I talked about a strategic approach to professional relationships, this is what brings all of that together into one easy piece. We've developed this digitally, and we've been working with a minimum viable product for a couple of years, testing it with organizations like Harrods and Sodexo, and it's been testing really well. And we're now about to start a fundraising campaign for the next stage of development, where, guess what, we're bringing AI into the tool. So at the moment, you'll go in and you'll be faced with a field to put in your matrix title, which is your objective, and then you'll have a blank matrix to fill in. We now want to create a version which is using a closed language model. So it uses my teaching, my books, everything that I give it to base on. So it's getting curated advice, not just going to the internet and telling you to spam 1,000 people on LinkedIn. And what will happen is it will ask you what you want to achieve. It will help you form the right objective, and maybe one matrix, maybe three. It will help you populate them. The vision I have is that it will scrape your LinkedIn and CRM systems. So it will say, oh, you've got Coca-Cola as a stakeholder group. I can see you're connected to 5 people on Coca-Cola on LinkedIn. Should they be on your matrix? Or I can see you've got contacts in Singapore and as one of your stakeholder groups. I see you know 20 people in Singapore from your CRM. Should they be on your matrix? So it will help you populate it and take you through the stages. Then it will analyze it and say, you know, where you're weak. So you haven't got enough influencers or you haven't got enough advocates. And then you'll identify through discussion with the AI bot which relationships you want to focus on, and it will help you create a 30-day action plan to build those relationships and ask for help. So that's the vision where we want to go over the next few months.
All right, so wait a minute. I want to put it up on the screen. It's influencers, introducers, implementers, and information.
Yeah, information, insight, and ideas. Yeah. So I've cheated. I've added some extra eyes into my 4 eyes model.
No, I like it. All right, I'll put it up on the screen so people can see it. I really like that structure. All right, let's show it so people I got it right. Yeah. So people can sort of use it. So, okay. So I think about that on a much bigger scale because I love the idea of it, and I'd like to get more background from you separately, of course. But if we expand it beyond professional lives as I could see a tool to use for troubling times, right? So we've got a lot of people worrying about losing their jobs to AI. We've got other people worried about losing their jobs just because of the economic contraction that's going to happen on the back of the war. There's loads and loads of things that are going on. But even to the point of building local community connections, because that's going to be the most important thing that you have as we go through into more crises. So if you think about it from if you were imagining this tool to be used in a broader way, how could you see it benefiting humanity?
Well, let me take the first part of that, because you said beyond professional, and then you talked about people looking for career change or they're worried about their jobs. Yeah. That's professional relationships.
And as well as
So and a lot of the conversations I've been having recently are with people who want help and support, knowing what's next in their career. And it's quite interesting. Over the last 2 or 3 years, the balance of my work has pivoted away from sales. I still work in that space, but to a much lesser degree compared to leadership development, career development, and future personal options. So that's the first thing. But this is a system that's designed to help you work out how other people can help you achieve an objective. Because my area of speciality is professional relationships. That's obviously the usage that I'm focused on, but that doesn't mean it has to be exclusively that. And, let's take your last example, which is community groups and bringing a community together. If I'm in my local community, and let's say, let's bring it really up to date and on topic. Let's say I'm based in the Middle East, and I'm worried about how my community is coping and adapting and able to manage day to day while bombs are raining overhead and drones are whizzing past. And I want to create a project to bring my community together and provide the support to those in need. You'd start a matrix and you would say supporting my local community would be your objective. And then your stakeholder groups might be local politicians, local business and consumer groups, residents associations and so forth. And then you start populating that with the key influencers, movers and shakers and so on, and work out who you need to bring on board so that you're not on your own in trying to drive forward this initiative. And where your relationships are weak, where your blind spots are in that network, who you don't know, or who you do know, but you're not thinking of, or you're not thinking of them in that context. So you can really leverage all of the expertise and all of the skill sets within that community. There's nothing to stop people using it for that purpose as well. It's just not where my area of focus is. But yeah, it
Yeah.
would be wonderful if it was used for something like that.
Yeah, I think back to Phuket during the pandemic when we brought a community together to take
Yeah.
care of people who didn't have any money, so they couldn't buy food. So we had people who were raising awareness. We had people doing the work out in the field. We had people buying the food, packing the food. But we also had a lot of rich people who weren't doing much, but they could give us money to fund it,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, that's sort of the place that I went to.
Yeah, and when you've got a project like that, you know, you've touched on it there, you have various skill sets you need to leverage effectively. So we need to raise awareness. Okay, who are the marketing guys? Who are the PR people? Who are the influencers within our community? Let's make sure that we know who they are so that we can direct them. That's where the 4 eyes really comes into its own.
Mm. Yeah, the communicators. All right. We've got David's joined us. Looks like he's cold sitting in the field somewhere. If any of you guys have got anything to add, just jump in. But okay, so I definitely am going to look into this more, the tool. Can you let us know when it's launched so we can share it?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. So at the moment, we're just on a test server, and it's sort of restricted access just for testing and a handful of clients. As I said, we're about to launch a fundraising round to get to the next stage and interviewing next stage developers. I'm hopeful that by the end of this year, we'll have something commercial.
Yeah, nice. Good one. All right, so asking for help. That's something I know that you're passionate about. I've seen you talking about it for years and years and years. And a lot of people struggle with it, me included. So take us on that journey. How do we get better at it?
Awareness is the first thing. So let me take you to the beginning of the journey, why it became a key topic for me. I think I mean, I'm going back 12 years, so I have to sort of test my memory, but I think I was still talking about how to ask for help before this happened. But you know, we're both, Andrea, you and I met through the professional speaking community. A number of us here are members of professional speaking associations, and the PSA, the Professional Speaking Association in the UK, is my tribe. You know, I have so many close friends within that community, and in 2014 my business was really struggling. And I consider myself to be a very transparent, open, and honest person. And I went along to a professional speaking association meeting just outside London. And people were saying, as they do every meeting like this, how's work? How's business? And I was saying, it's great. And it wasn't. We were £400 away from our overdraft limit. You know, it really wasn't great. Wow. And someone ran a workshop that day, and there was a little questionnaire at the beginning that you filled in. And then he went around the group and asked how people had answered each question. And one of the questions, and it was in 2 forms, it was the same question, is what's the state of your business? So it's what is the state of your speaking business, and what's the state of any other business you have? And there were 4 options, which were it's new, it's growing, it's stable, or it's in decline. And when he went around the room and he asked people to put their hands up, everyone put their hands up for it's new, or it's growing, it's stable. No one put their hand up for in decline, including me, when we were really struggling. And that was just a moment for me where I realized that I was shocked by it. And I was shocked at myself as someone who considers themselves to be very open. And I made a commitment to myself in that moment that, I mean, my thinking was, this is a group of people who are there to inspire others and support others. And if we can't be open and transparent as a community with each other, how can we do that? And I was sure I couldn't be the only person who was struggling there. And so my commitment to myself was to turn my business around with the help of other people and then talk about it at our national convention, which I did in 2016. That's how we met, because Andrew Bryant, who was then president of APSS, heard the buzz about my talk and invited me to Singapore, where I delivered the same talk in 2017, and a number of other speaking associations around the world. And that started me on the journey that led to the book, Just Ask, because I had clients asking for it as well at that point. It was only ever meant to be for the speaking community. What gets in our way is a number of things. And I went on this journey of exploration to go deeper, but I boil it down to 3 key reasons we don't ask for help. And they're all in our head, by the way. Number one is that we are worried about being a burden to other people. Number 2 is that we don't want to be seen as weak or vulnerable. Number 3 is that we just make assumptions. Other people can't help us or don't want to help us, therefore we don't ask. And if you look at each of those 3 in turn, you can get past them quite easily. You know, we don't want to be a burden to other people. Well, think about the last time you helped someone else and how it made you feel. You know, when I'm delivering talks on this or workshops, I ask the room, how did it make you feel? And the only answers I get are positives. Yeah, I felt valued, or it was a pleasure, or I loved it. You don't get people say, oh, I felt like they were a burden. So we have a disconnect between if we help other people, we feel good about ourselves and we feel good about that, but we deny other people the same pleasure. So we have to get past that, and we just have to make it easy for them to help us. That's a different thing. So you can be a burden if you position your help in the wrong way or you're asking the wrong way, but you don't have to. Weak or vulnerable, that's because you're confusing vulnerability with weakness, and you're conflating them when they're different things. Vulnerability is a strength, it's not a weakness. It takes strength to ask for help and admit you don't know everything, and you become stronger as a result of the help that you get. So it's nowhere near a weakness. You can sound weak when you ask for help if you pitch it in the wrong way, but you can equally sound strong when you ask for help. You know, I'm really excited about the next stage of my career. I'm looking for something that's really going to challenge me. Can I sort of get your input and your thoughts? That doesn't sound weak. It sounds confident and from someone who knows where they want to go. So it's how you pitch it, how you position it that makes the difference, that makes you weak or not, but don't confuse that with vulnerability. And then thirdly was we assume. Well, don't assume. Let other people decide for themselves, but just make it okay for them to say no. And you can communicate to other people it's okay to say no, but more importantly, communicate it to yourself, because this is where the problem is our ego gets in the way. Our ego says that a no is a rejection, that it's personal. Let me tell you one story to illustrate where it's not. I approached a long-term member of the PSA. I've been a member of the Professional Speaking Association since 2003. He was already a legend of the PSA when I joined. I approached him to mentor me a number of years ago, and he said no. And it wasn't about me, it was about him. And he's a really good friend. We had become friendly before I asked him, but he's a very good friend now. I know how busy he is. It was about his ability to deal with a mentoring commitment. But he invited me onto one of his programs, 2-day program, which I went along, and he's become a mentor to me for 15 years since I asked. He just wouldn't call himself that. He mentors me on, if I pick up the phone and ask for his advice, he gives me his advice. He's an informal mentor. He didn't want the formal commitment, but he didn't know how to phrase that. So him saying no wasn't a rejection of me. It was about his ability to commit to something. And so easy to take that as a rejection, but actually we need to process it in a different way and understand it's about the person who we've asked, not about ourselves a lot of the time, particularly if we're asking the right people based on our 7 stages of professional relationship that we talked about earlier.
So one of the things that I've noticed, especially coming from Phuket back to Singapore, is there's a speed that people are operating at, which is unlike anything I've seen before. You know, how technology is supposed to make everything easier. I don't see any evidence of that. In Asia, there's a different thing. When people ask for help, they don't ask in the right way, and they expect the person they're asking for help to do too much. You know, so that's always a bit of a problem. But the other thing is, people just don't seem to be able to make the time because they're moving so fast. Have you noticed that difference? Like when you think back to when you first wrote that book to today, it could be different in the UK and across Europe, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I want to acknowledge the cultural difference, and I wrote a whole chapter about that, and there are very clear cultural differences. But one of the things that I have interpreted, I'm going to say this is my interpretation because others might disagree with me, but my observation of, I don't know how many years it is now that I've been speaking internationally and 30 plus countries around the world, is that I think that there are very clear cultural distinctions, but there are also we are dealing with individuals and personality styles and everything else. So a cultural difference is just one factor in how people will respond. And even within a different culture, like Asia to Europe, you will have people who conform more to a cultural stereotype and those who go nowhere near it. So you have to look at individuals. I can't say that, particularly from a European perspective, but a lot of my work is in Asia. You know, a lot of my work last year was India. I can't say that I have noticed a speeding up that has impacted people's ability to help. I would maintain that if you build a strong enough relationship with people, think of those 7 stages of professional relationship. I call supporter and advocate the sweet spot. A supporter is someone who, if you picked up the phone and asked for their help, they'd be happy to help you. An advocate, you don't have to pick up the phone. They're out there talking about you if an opportunity arises. I think once people are at that stage, if you need their help, they'll find the time. And it goes back to what I said before about making it easy for people to help you. And so if people are really busy and it's relentless, don't go and ask them for something that's going to take them half a day to fulfill. Make it, you know, and acknowledge where they're at. I know you're really busy. I need your help, but I'm aware you are slammed at the moment. I have one ask. Can I have 5 minutes of your time, or something like that, so that you can acknowledge it and make it easier for them. But I think once people are at that supporter advocate stage, then for me, I haven't observed a speeding up that would impact that.
Okay. Earlier I was sort of mentioning things like the diminishing job market potential. How does that sort of, so for me, it's a case of get yourself prepared before it happens to you. What's your advice on that front?
Yeah, I think we've always had to be adaptable throughout. I've always had to be adaptable throughout my working life. You know, I'm thinking as I speak here. I started saying we've always had to be adaptable to work, but then that's not true, because when I came into the workforce, I came into a workforce that had a culture of job for life. You know, where I described it the other week as the silver watch brigade. People would get their silver watch automatically after 25 years, and everyone expected it because you joined a company and you stayed with that company. So no, we haven't always had to be adaptable. One of the key things is we definitely have to be more adaptable today than at any point in my lifetime, in my career, and we are speeding up, and that is speeding up more and more and more. So there's always been scaremongering since the dawn of science fiction about the future of the workforce, but now we're seeing that look more true and more imminent than ever before. So people do have to think ahead and be ready. Part of being ready is having the right network of people around you and maintaining those relationships. So to go into the heart of what I do, one of the worst positions you can find yourself in when it comes to needing support from your network is knowing that you need support from your network, but you haven't bothered to be there for them. Becoming that person who reaches out and connects on LinkedIn with someone you haven't seen for 5 years, delighting them that you remember them and you've reached out, and then following it up by having to say, by the way, I'm looking for a new job. Can you help me? Yeah. No one wants to be that person. No one wants to hear from that person, because we feel devalued if someone connects with us in that way. So dig your well before you're thirsty. Make friends before you need them. Invest in your network now. Invest in your network. And by investing in your network, I mean reach out when you don't have an agenda. Show an interest in other people rather than yourself. Make sure that if or when something happens where you need the help and support of your network, it feels seamless. It feels natural for you to reach out and say, hey, could you help me with something? And I think that's the most important thing. The other is just to have conversations, find out what's happening in other people's industries, other people's sectors, and take the blinkers off of your eyes. Because the other thing that happens, we define ourselves by our job. Who are you? I'm a graphic designer. Who are you? I'm a professional speaker. Who are you? I'm an accountant. That's not who you are, but it is how we talk and how we define ourselves. What that means is that when that job disappears because of AI, let's assume that the doom mongers are right and whole swathes of professions are going to disappear. Does your identity go with it? And are you left in limbo? So one of the ways of preparing yourselves to be adaptable for that situation is to understand don't define yourself by a profession, but if you are going to define yourself professionally, define yourself by the skills and the abilities you bring to a role. Define yourself by the things that you enjoy doing the most. Define yourself by the environment you like working in. So I'm someone who enjoys communicating, who enjoys troubleshooting, helping people find a solution that suits them. I can't, I'm not a 9-to-5 sit at my desk person. I love travel. I love meeting people in person, and I'm a good communicator. And if I define myself that way rather than I'm a speaker and an author, then that opens more doors for me, because I can turn to people in a completely different sector and say, what does that look like in your world? I'm a communicator. I like traveling a lot. I like helping people. What does that look like in your world? And you can open up more opportunities. So my answer is to start having conversations. Have conversations that you're investing in your network when you don't need them. Have conversations that you're broadening your horizons.
Nice. Some really, really great advice there. My big takeaway in the middle of that, without being said, is in person rather than online. Because so many people are leaving the online world now. They can't do it anymore.
Yeah, just one thing on that. It's a really interesting point. In person where you can, but Andrea, you and I haven't been in the same country, I don't think, at the same time since 2018. We still have maintained a strong relationship where you pick up the phone or drop me an email and ask for help, I'd help you, and I would hope vice versa. Part of that is the strength of the relationship and the connection from the beginning. We connected naturally, and often that will happen, and often it doesn't. You build it over time. But the other part is we've been able to maintain a relationship at distance online, and it's more efficient to do so as well. So I'm very active on LinkedIn. I send out a newsletter, and I have done for probably 15-20 years. Once a month is the frequency now. And I mentioned that specifically because I was on a train a few months ago, and a woman got on at one of the stops, and she sat opposite me, and the train left the stop, and we're halfway to the next stop. Suddenly she looked up and went, Andy. I hadn't seen her for over 10 years, but she gets my newsletter every month. So she has felt connected to me despite us not talking for a decade. And I get that a lot. People feel like I'm in their life constantly because I'm active online. So even if they're not engaging, they're what we call lurkers on social media. They feel that connection. So I wouldn't dismiss it. The other thing,
I wasn't dismissing it. Definitely wasn't. But just not that.
Yeah. But the other thing I would say, because I think it's important for people to hear, because I hear a lot, you cannot build the same strength of relationship online as you can face to face, and I totally get that. However, I have just published a book with the person who's become my closest and most trusted collaborator over the last few years. We didn't meet in person until after we had submitted that book to the publisher for publishing. We had gone through the stages of getting to know each other, trust each other, me inviting Ruth to co-author with me, so trusting her to that degree, and then the process of writing a book together, which is not easy in collaboration, before we met in person. So it can be done. Now we've met twice in person. She lives in New York. I'm in just outside London. We've met twice in person. And so that builds the relationship further. And if we lived in the same city, we'd be even closer. Or we'd hate each other. It could go the other way. But you can do it online. But yeah, of course, if you can meet in person, it's going to make a difference. Andrew Bryant is in London next week, who I mentioned earlier, lives in Portugal now. I'm dropping my plans so I can meet him for dinner because I want to see him in person.
Yeah. I know it matters, but it was more around.
Yeah.
There's a pullback from the digital platforms for a lot of different reasons, but the main reason is people are they're done with the emotional intensity. So they're pulling away, and they're done with the AI slop, and they're done with this, and they're done with that. So they're just pulling back. So that ability to communicate. But I wanted to ask any of the guys if you want to ask Andy something before we go into the next topic.
Yeah, what you're describing is very interesting, and it's kind of debunking one of my theses about virtual communication, because I think in my case, I have never really established a strong connection with anyone I've only ever met virtually.
Yeah.
However, I have friends from the past, people I've known for decades, and we might not speak for 5 years like you described, but because we have a long shared history, it's like the 5 years never happened. It's like we spoke last week.
Yeah.
And that can only, I feel like, be the case because you've had this shared long history in the real physical world.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that you managed to do something as extensive as a book project with someone you never met. That I find really impressive, because I would find that extraordinarily hard to get to that point with someone, I haven't actually shaken hand with, had a drink with.
Yeah.
Can I just say, Richard, we've never met. We do all right.
No.
Catching up weekly.
We do very, very well.
I was just biting my tongue on this side here. But
no, we do really well. But I think there's also a difference there, right? Because we are, like you described, New York versus London, we are so far apart that it's just not possible. But I cannot see myself have a discussion with someone in Reading that leads to me writing a book with that person without meeting them. It's unfathomable.
And if you can collaborate on a podcast or a stream like this with someone, I mean, what you said about distance, that's an excuse, because someone in Reading, someone in Singapore, if you're connecting in the experience of connecting in the virtual world, whether it's social media, whether it's Zoom and Teams chats, whatever it might be, there's no difference. It doesn't matter to you where they're based in that space. No. Let's say, for example, they were unable to travel, they had a disability, and you were connecting with them online because of that, and they're literally 10 miles from you, but they can't be around people. It's a manufacture. I get it. I completely understand it. And I probably would have said the same thing beforehand, but it's a manufactured excuse. The fact is, we use different media. So it wasn't just type. We Zoomed, we WhatsApp, voice notes and so forth. You have different points of connection that bring the human touch into it, and let me stress, I am an advocate for meeting in person. That is the ultimate way to build a relationship, but I wanted to illustrate that it can be done, and I think there are artificial limitations you're putting on it, because you've just demonstrated it. You can do it with Andrea and not with someone in Reading, despite the fact that their address is of no consequence to you if you're not going there. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, that is a mental limitation, because I would immediately say, okay, let's meet in Guildford or whatever. It's halfway for us.
Yeah. All right. So just looking at the time. So you're getting a lot of articles published in Psychology Today, which is awesome. Congratulations. So you published something recently, and you were talking about the generational differences, and were actually challenging the assumptions, which I've always said I'm a millennial in a Gen X body. I'm probably a Gen Z in a Gen X body these days. But you challenged something there that I thought was important to be challenged, because I don't buy that argument either. Do you want to just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I interviewed Alistair Greener, who is the current president of the Professional Speaking Association by coincidence, as we've been talking about it. And Alistair recently brought out a book, I think Generationally Speaking, I think is the title. So I interviewed him about his book. Now, since I published with Ruth the Financial Times Guide to Mentoring last year, I have been talking a lot about, more than ever before, about understanding different generations and sharing all of the statistics. So Gen Z are on average going to stay in a job for 2 years, compared to much longer for older generations, but they'll stay for 5 years if they have a mentor. Gen Z want their boss to be interested in them beyond just their role. They want their boss to have a vested interest in their career and what's going on with their life. So there are observed generational differences that I will reference when I'm talking. One of my talks is about mentoring in the modern world, you know, and how we have to adapt to different expectations of younger generations. Alistair challenged my approach, and I found it really interesting. And he talked about the different myths that we have about generations. So for one of the things, you know, everything I've just shared in the stats, and it is borne out by a lot of the conversations that I have, but it goes back to something that I talked about earlier when we were talking about cultural differences. It's the same thing. You can't, is this a word? Amorphize? You can't just lump everyone together and say that's how they behave. And generations are the same. We can get indicators from it. We can understand that generational values, generational behavior is formed by a range of different inputs, and part of that is what's happening in your society. So in the age of shorter attention spans, you know, the demand for 20-minute talks because of TED Talks, the demand for bite-size programming on YouTube rather than long dramas, the demand for bingeable series and so forth, that is going to influence how a younger generation is going to appear in the workplace, for sure. So there's that societal input that is going to lead to that, but you've got individuals within that at the same time. So that's just one example of one of the myths of the different generations. Another of the myths that Alistair talked about, and it's again something that I was repeating and probably putting too much weight on before my conversation with Alistair, is that for the first time in history there's 6 generations working together in the workplace. But actually there's not. Because when you look at the silent generation, who are now over in their 80s plus, how many of them are really turning up on a regular basis in the workplace? 1% of the workforce, I think it works out as. And the Gen Alpha, they're only just seeping into the workplace now. So we're still on, I think it's something like 3.5 generations in the workplace, not the 5 or 6 that is typically trotted out. And I've been guilty of that. But when you distill it down into where the force of it is, then or where the bulk of it is, it's a much smaller grouping of generations than maybe we've been talking about. And the third myth that I shared in that article is that we have to understand Gen Z. Everything's about millennials and Gen Z. And our focus has to be on understanding them in the workplace. Alistair pointed out that most people at managerial levels and senior levels are still Gen X. Millennials coming into that, you know, now a lot of millennials in their 40s now, I think. So they are now in senior levels as well. But Gen Zs are still a long way off of that. And a lot of millennials are. So we can't forget these people that are really driving business and driving commerce and driving organizations of all kinds. You know, and I think it's caused me to reflect that I'm guilty, and I don't think I'm the only one, that we suddenly started ignoring a massive part of the workforce, and a part of the workforce that is driving it at the moment to a large degree, because we've got a shiny new glittering star to have a look at and to capture our attention spans are getting distracted ourselves.
Yeah. No, so there's so many things you just said then, but so first of all, those 1% of silent generation still working mate, legends. Gen Alpha, they can't be in the workforce yet because my son's about to finish school. So we're not doing a show next week because I've got to go to his graduation, and he's definitely Gen Z. So, we're technically, and then Gen X, which four of us are, we're the small generation that no one really gives a shit about, but at the same time we are the senior leadership roles in business today. So the whole conversation. But what I do think is really important about the intergenerational conversation is priorities. So, the boomer generation, the silent generation, what do they care about? They care about, having places to live, healthcare, pensions, being able to survive in a relatively healthy way. Gen X, we're the ones in the middle, taking care of the older people, taking care of the younger people, leading businesses, doing all that sort of stuff. And then you've got millennials, probably in a different sort of situation to the Gen Z, because Gen Z are entering the workforce and there's less jobs than there's ever been to start with, right? And then you've got a lot of old white men running global politics, making decisions.
Steady.
It's true. Let's look at what's going on in the world right now, from wars, climate change, geopolitics, all that sort of stuff. And you've got younger people sort of looking at older people going, what the hell are you guys doing? Or you'll hear older people talking about things and you'll be like, why don't you just shut up? Right? You're not going to be around for the impacts of this, so just shut up. And I can imagine young people looking at older people going, just shut up, right? You've got all the money, you've got all the property, you've got a comfortable pension, you've got everything, but you're destroying the foundation of which we can live in the future, So I think that's another thing that from an intergenerational perspective we don't like having that conversation. We've mentioned it a few times. David and I have talked about it a few times, but I don't know, just wanted to see if you had any thoughts.
And apologies because I missed an entire generation there, which is the boomers, which are the ones that you're talking about. And it's really interesting, the point you make about the just shut up. We had that conversation in the UK because when Brexit vote happened, a lot of the people that voted for Brexit were the boomers. And you had younger generations, obviously including me, saying, you're not going to be here. And there was a very vocal conversation about you're voting for your own selfish interest and not for the interest of your grandchildren and the generations to come. So we had a very vocal conversation about that in the UK. I think, I'm not sure, but I think politically that seems to be globally subverted now, where you are getting a lot more of the younger generations taking what we would have seen as older generations' attitudes. There's a lot of younger generation. There's a lot of narrative about younger generation support for right-wing causes. You look at the popularity of Charlie Kirk before he was killed on university campuses. We're seeing in the UK, it's a tiny minority, but you are seeing extreme right-wing, extremely religious, which is very unlike the UK, movements that are dominated by young people. And then you've got the whole manosphere, which is as right-wing as you can get, which is younger generation focused as well. Very, very Victorian attitudes towards gender, for example. I mean, that might be doing a disservice to the Victorians, to be fair. So there is a shift in generational attitudes that I've not seen in my lifetime. That is, from my political perspective, worrying, but that's a personal perspective. But is interesting as well if you can be objective about it.
We talked about the manosphere a few weeks ago. All right. Anyone else got any questions?
Well, maybe not so much question. I think really value what Andy is saying in terms of the kind of connections, making those things. The one thing I'm really bad at that I've noticed in a long time, really bad in connecting and staying connected with people. Is something I feel just not a social skill I feel I have, although actually in many ways that's not true. It's just that I just don't feel like that. One of the things it reminded me about this very remote thing is back in the day before the internet, we wrote letters and we never met each other. People collaborated on not tremendous projects and things without ever meeting. I remember a friend of mine who was a physicist, and he was talking about how back in the day, scientists communicated by letters going through donkeys crossing Europe. and so absolutely, I really love this aspect that the physical connection is not always what needs to start it.
You've reminded me. So when I was 25, I backpacked around the world, and I used to write physical letters home, because we didn't have email, we didn't have mobile phones, we didn't have anything like that. Definitely didn't have social networks. And I used to handwrite physically 7-page letters home. This is where my love of writing really started, because I would write the 7-page letter and I'd photocopy it and post it off to various friends and family. My friends were giving it to their parents and passing it on, and so and it was, but you wouldn't do that now. You would just post an update on Facebook, and it's sad in a way, isn't it, that level of communication has dropped off to that degree, and it's immediate now. Everything's immediate. Everyone was reading about it 2 or 3 months after something happened. And I've still got those letters somewhere. Should dig them out and remind myself. Whereas now they would just, if I'd be lucky, flash up as Facebook memories with a quick picture. So I know your point, David, was about the collaboration remotely, but just interesting that even when back in the day when you wrote letters, they still went viral. If they had to be good, so they still went viral. But when I was trying to recover my letters, because obviously I didn't keep copies, I just sent them out. It was actually my friend went back to her mum in Ireland, who had the copies of the letters from 30 years before, and got them back for me.
Yeah. And I think to this point of what I was saying, being poor as is, I used to be better at writing letters, and those letters weren't with a purpose other than just exchanging information, connecting.
Yeah,
I think actually it's gotten worse because somehow that social aspect of it seems to be lost out of social media in some ways.
But it doesn't have to be. Look behind me. As well as the books, what else can you see? Particularly if I turn my camera over here, it's all cards. It's all thank you cards. Some of those go back 20 plus years. Some of them, the ink has worn off, but I never throw them away, that personal touch. If
English in their cards.
Yeah, if that's your strength,
great idea. Just sort of
embrace it. Yeah. Just drop someone a card and handwrite it, and just say, I was thinking about you. I just thought I'd drop you a note. How have you been? How do you think they would feel if they received that?
Yeah.
And the mistake we make is the only time we send cards now is at Christmas, particularly professionally. And that's the one time not to send a card.
Yeah.
Because people aren't in their offices, they're on holiday. They get them en masse. So my first business in this space, our chairman used to go, and we worked in one office. Michael would go to Spain just before the Christmas period, just as the cards started arriving. So the cards would come in, we'd put them up on his desk. I was the only one to read them. They'd sit on his desk till the day before he came back, and we'd take them down and they'd be binned. Whereas these cards, they're staying on my shelf and on my wall for 20 years plus because they stand out. You send a card at Christmas, so do 20 people, other people, maybe 10 now, maybe 5 now, but you're still one of X number. You send a card to say, hey, we haven't spoken for a while. How are you? Or thanks for coming on my show. All my podcast guests, new guests get a card, personalized card. That's going to stand out.
Nice. I like it. Oh, I want to show you my favorite writing memory. When I was in Nepal in 1995, I noticed that the inside of the toilet paper had these incredible amount of cardboard. So a friend of mine who'd been in Nepal before me, I wrote her a letter on the cardboard and told her she's the only person on the planet that would know what it was. But the idea of photocopying letters, I wasn't even doing that when I was traveling. Anyway, Andy, thank you. let's move on and let's sort of integrate what you've been sharing into the rest of the conversation. But we started with a very sort of brief sort of discussion around the war. Was it the ultimate bluff, when Donald Trump was threatening the end of civilization? So there's a chap in Asia called Chandra Nair. I'm going to try and see if I can get him on the show. He's quite out there, but he put up a post on LinkedIn today, and I've just covered a couple of bits from it. What kind of political mind and what kind of society, which I thought was a really important thing to add, since he is its reflection, believes it has the authority to distinguish a civilization. And he sort of was talking about the fact that we're not seeing people on the streets in America. We're not seeing them protest and speak up about this. The question is whether America has the courage to do so, or is it doomed to drown in its toxic exceptionalism and bloodthirsty psyche? I just thought it was a really good sort of insight. People who told themselves they stood for liberty, heard their president promise annihilation, and went about their evening over-consuming and watching late-night TV. So, of course, this is the week of the tweet. Open the fucking strait, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. And then, of course, the next one. But who wants to sort of add some thoughts?
Ooh. Lots. I'm still very much in the camp that I think the Iranians are exactly where they wanted to be a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
There's never been any doubt in my mind that they knew they were going to end up here. What they've actually achieved is quite astonishing. Sure, they've taken a lot of losses and they've seen bombs fall over the country, but you have guaranteed no regime change. That's completely off the agenda here. They will.
Do you think they're surprised? Do you think they're surprised by their success?
No, I think this was kind of the game plan all along. There could be tweaks on that front, but more or less, they have achieved astonishing success. If you are the Iranian regime, sure, we lost a few bodies in senior positions, but there will be no regime change now. I can promise you that. They have cemented their internal position. They have probably been given some kind of go-ahead for a further nuclear program. They will probably be allowed to levy a toll on the Strait of Hormuz. They can hold the whole Middle East at ransom whenever they feel like it, and they are a lot closer to overthrowing the House of Saud. I mean, this is like a jackpot if you're an Iranian here in senior position. And the only wild card left for them, which they probably can no longer control, because I increasingly feel that Israel is doing their own thing, is what Israel's reaction will be if Trump pulls out. And
I think, I think exactly, kind of in a sense with Richard, in that way. But I think what that does is it says it increases the chance that Trump will do something quite drastic in order to counter that. I think that there is good reason why the chief of staff was removed. My feeling is if you remove that person and you replace it with another person, you're going to replace it with someone who is going to be supporting you in whatever it is that you may want to do in that way along. And so I think as a bluffing game, you don't bluff unless you're going to actually follow up with it.
I'm not sure. I agree. I hope that I'm right in this. I'm not sure. No one knows with Trump. But I think Taco Trump might come through again. Trump always chickens out. I don't know that he will take that last step. And I think he will. You look at what happened with Venezuela. I think that's a really good guide, where he goes in to take the regime, and he ends up with the regime, Maduro's vice president in charge, with probably very little change, but a little bit more control over what's happening. I think that was his objective here. Certainly after he realized he couldn't blow them out of the water and get regime change straight away, he kept saying, oh, we've knocked out this level, then that level, then that level, but still you've got the regime in place. So what I think he will do is he will try and paint a defeat as a victory, a dishonorable draw at best as a victory, which is what he's been doing all along. But I think you might get Taco Trump come. I think there's two wild cards in this. One, Richard's reference, which is Israel. And I'm really, really worried by what's happened in Lebanon in the last few days, because I think that's a sign that Israel is pulling away from US control.
Yes.
And you've got an extreme right wing, certainly coalition partners, if not the whole government, but the extreme right wing are driving the government. Netanyahu he needs the war, because as soon as they have elections, he either needs to not have elections, or he needs to bring the country together behind something that a war provides. Ask any Brit from 1982 in the Falklands how that plays, so that he can avoid corruption charges. So I think that's wildcard one. And the other interesting one, and I don't know quite how it will fall, is the midterms in America, and how Trump perceives his party's chances being impacted by pulling out and making the best of a bad situation, which is where I think he'll go, because he came in on a ticket of, if you want war, vote Biden, and no foreign interventions, or whether he wants to appeal to the MAGA macho mentality and up the ante. My gut is he would go for the former and Taco.
All right, Joe, do you want to jump in?
I think when you start looking at a cat, and then you go like, oh, I wonder what the strategy is. The way I think you have to look at Trump is someone who's actually employed the same strategy throughout his life, and it's just an extension of the same strategy as well. So if you think about the successes he's had in the past, how he is basically bulldozed his way, he's leveraged power, he's gotten people to capitulate, and he has a long string of failures as well, where he just moves on from as well, because the next thing happens. He's just going to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. You pretty much look at it that way. This is what's going to happen. There's going to be that. There's going to be, he likes influential people, right? He likes to have that sort of association with that. And for him right now, the influential friend that he really likes is Israel. So there's a kind of it's sort of like I think a social sort of thing. It's a slightly fashionable sort of thing as well going on here about how you wage war. And if you listen to some of his language as well, he's learned a few war words. He's talking about. He's not talking about invasion. He's no longer doing the grade 5 language that you could rely on Trump before. I mean, he actually says prosecute a war, and I went like, I don't. That's new. So he's influenced by a kind of friend. So the really kind of strange way I kind of settled on just a while ago. And I just thought this is gonna read very differently, but the new Epstein is Netanyahu, as in like he's got an influential friend. He kind of likes what he does. I think he's cool. But he may not have the kind of same. There is no fourth dimensional chess going on. If you what I think sometimes happens is you sit down with someone and you think that he's a chess genius, and he goes like, oh, but just move this here, that could work.
Yeah, so it's really interesting listening to all of you. I'm probably more closely aligned to Andy. Like, so when you look at his past actions and you sort of map that behavior, like you were talking about, Joe, he never cared about failing as long as he kept making money, and he's certainly making money, right? But for this time, while his family are raking in billions of dollars from everything that's going on, this is an outcome that's out of his control. Whereas before with his casinos, he was raking all this money while they were losing everything and went into not into debt. They basically destroyed the whole business. So and then the whole Israel thing, like if Israel doesn't have the support of the US, then how can the relationship with the other Arab states stay, where the rest of the Middle East doesn't basically turn around and say, all right, Israel, we've had enough of you, you're the troublemaker. And then with the ceasefire, the court case against Netanyahu for corruption will go ahead in the next couple of weeks. I think it's like Sunday or something. But if the ceasefire is violated, that court case doesn't go ahead. So there's a good reason for Netanyahu to keep going in Lebanon. I wanted to pull up the dark triad. So this is just a version. Like people are talking about it more, and I've got this in my training where I sort of talk about the governments, business, media, big organizations all around the world. We are dominated by the dark triad. So historically, ancient civilizations, the Vikings, the Papua New Guineans, the Vikings would kill them or get rid of them. The Papua New Guineans would make them live in by themselves up a mountain until they needed them in battle, right? Our world is run by these people, and I don't think everyone kind of knows about it, like what all the sort of qualities are. But narcissism, psychopathy, both of those Trump gets labelled with. But if you look at Machiavellianism, he's got the charm. He doesn't charm us, but he does charm a certain amount of people, right? Netanyahu, if you want to make it the dark tetrad, you'd add in sadism, and I'd probably put him in there. But lying and deceiving, the ability to influence, selfishness. They don't care. They don't care what other people think. They don't have empathy. They don't have compassion. But these are the people who are running the world, and they're also the people that got us to this point with Iran. And I think Iran's doing, like, if as far as I'm concerned, good on them. As if I was on their side. They've got 31 separate sort of entities in the country, so you can't take out one. You have to take out 31, and they're spread across the entire country, right? So unbelievable, right?
That's the whole meaning of kind of the death of civilization thing, right? I mean, it's kind of a bit of the next thing. If it's not a TACO, then it's going to be all or nothing in a way. I think either way, no matter what happens, what's happened so far is the clear winner is Russia. It very much addresses the connection of Russia and Trump in that way. There's a really, really close tie there. Everything from Venezuela, from Canada, from everything along has been in support of strengthening Russia. The whole NATO situation, everything about it. And China is actually not the winner out of this. It faces the uncertainty of a global economy much more than other countries along. Even though it's diversified, its oil and all of those things, people look at it in those ways. But actually, it's really about kind of who stands up out of this in the current moment, able to do that. And even if Trump backs off or Trump goes all out and goes crazy, Russia wins out of this. No matter what you do. And the implications of that to Europe is going to spend a lot more money on their defense, which means all of the social programs that you're hoping for is going to disappear because it's going to be there. The US is asking for 1.5 trillion for the next defense budget. Europeans are all going to step up in that way, in that order. And the other part of this, with the Israel part, which is really important, is to note that the corruption charges on Netanyahu are starting now. because they've just finished that state of emergency, and so the civil courts can now proceed again. So he almost has to go and create another crisis in order for him not to become jailed in that way. So this aspect of kind of how is Trump going to face what is midterm or whatever it is. Now, I think Joe has absolutely right about, what's the strategy of a cat. That's, he can do really well in the midterm by completely devastating Iran within the kind of a crazy support base. It's very hard to tell about support base in America. And the thing that's really remarkable about all of this is there are really no leaders, Western or otherwise, who stand out and says, look, it's a bad thing to go and beat people up just because you can.
Yeah.
And what you see from America, what you seem to see out of the news is with the ICE and what they do, is that there is kind of a Texas support for this Wild West face of, if you can beat someone up just because you can, that's a great thing that you can do that. So I don't think we can erase that out of this. We're not talking about the kind of logic that we would like. We're not talking about the governance that we want.
Yeah.
I think
that's an important point, Andy.
I think that in terms of going for the all-out option for Trump, it has to be all or nothing in terms of the midterms, because if he gets caught in the mid-ground, he's in trouble. He's already lost a lot of his MAGA base, Marjorie Taylor Greene being the most obvious, because they didn't want foreign intervention. If he gets drawn into what they're calling boots on the ground, but sending troops in, he's in real trouble. And he's already lost large proportions of the support that got him elected. And he's ever reliant on a portion of the MAGA base that is not enough. So it's like Netanyahu. It's similar in the they see a victory or backs to the wall crisis as unifying factors for their vote. And that's really worrying, because what that entails in either scenario is not something you want to be thinking about.
And to exactly to what Andy's saying, I think what that says is the approach is not about a proper military victory. Is a fireworks that allows him to end the fire show.
Yeah.
The fireworks show. That's what he's looking for. It's just a fireworks. So whatever happens after the fireworks, wherever all the Tritus lands and all the rest of it, he will one scenario, one way out is to have a massive fireworks that kind of says, well, that's it. We've done it now, you're devastated. The rest is up to the rest of the world to clean up. You're the ones who wants the oil. You go through it yourself. That's your problem.
It's like George W. Bush's mission accomplished sign, but on steroids, basically.
Yeah, but there's a ramification and an outcome, So it's all about controlling the narrative, right? And they've done an absolutely shit-house job with the narrative since the beginning of this war, no question about it, right? But also the narrative worldwide, and we've got Orban, the Hungarian elections, what they're trying to do with the narrative, right? And David was talking about Russia wins. There's no question about it. Millions of dollars are coming into the coffers, and I just feel for the Ukrainians. They're just sort of be sitting there, just going, oh, for God's sake, is this war ever going to end? But there was a piece that I wanted to talk about. It's called "The Last Temptation of Trump at the End of a Failed War." In a magazine called New Lines Magazine. I'll put it in the link after this, but they sort of use phrases like incremental normalization of the unacceptable, and that's things like civilian infrastructure targeted, international law dismissed. So and then it finishes with, in the end, what makes this moment different from other moments of great power recklessness, not the structural pressures, which are real enough, but the character of the man they are bearing down upon. So when you look at Trump, I mean, you're seeing all these reports around his swollen ankles and You know, he doesn't look like a healthy man. He looks tired. This could be the ultimate egoic sort of, there's a term where the shattering of the ego of the narcissist, you know, that sort of could tip him into collapse or tip him into action. And I think that's the thing. Did any of you have a chance to read that piece in the, what was it called, the New Lines magazine? Because I thought it was, I just thought it was a good way just to sort of get everyone to step back and sort of, when I was listening to people talking this week and reading what people were saying this week, I didn't feel that people were sitting in the depth of the moment, and there was a normality to the conversation. Like this is normal, when it was completely not normal. This week was not normal. That's what I was saying earlier, Andy. It really wasn't a normal week. You know, the threats that a president speaking that way, using those words. A crime, a war crime in its own right, just using the words, not the action, just using the words, right? I don't know if there's a point here in taco. Like when I see mainstream people using the word taco, I'm like, it might not be a good time to use that word. Like I like a joke. I like a joke better than the next person, right? But I don't know if taking the piss out of Trump is a good idea right now, because we don't know what he's capable of doing. And it doesn't look like the Americans, like in Congress or whatever, are going to do anything about it. I mean, are we going to see a military coup? You know, are we going to see something dramatic happen in the US? Because that's what this moment requires, because it is that serious, but it's like no one really wants to believe it's that serious. I don't know.
I'm going to have to hop off for a bit. It's raining, so I'm going to have to see.
I was looking at
perils of Mother Nature at its best, you know.
All right.
Well, I think we're also kind of missing a very important logistic bit here. What you said about Ukraine is absolutely true. We knew that Ukraine was actually making significant gains just before it kicked off in the Gulf. And the reason was that Russia is basically running out of people and money. Now, if you have money, you can get people, but mercenaries ultimately want to get paid. And now they have a much better chance of recruiting people because of the price of oil. And also the fact that direct sanctions are being lifted, which helps them tremendously in getting their oil to the places where they can pay for it. The other thing, which is absolutely catastrophic for the Ukrainians, is that, and we've spoken about this before, modern wars are supposed to be really short and brief. There isn't an arsenal of missiles and rockets that the US can keep on pounding on Iran for weeks and weeks. They are probably already at the absolute minimum level that the military would deem acceptable with home defense. It means Ukraine will not get these supplies. Even if Europe has the ability to pay for it, Ukraine will not get the surface-to-air missile defense that they need, etc. Because you eventually run out of money when you fire $2 million rockets at 30 grand drones.
Yeah,
it's just not a good economic game. And that's what US has been doing for a month on a massive scale.
But also the arrogance, right? But it's an arrogance.
Yeah, but because I think they came in with the mindset saying that it was going to be very brief, and if we achieve these very, very early objectives, it will all fold. It has some resemblance to Barbarossa, you know. If we go for the decapitation strategy, Russia will fail. The longer you stay here, the more it works in the favor of the Iranians. US cannot keep on firing rockets.
No. And they're actually putting their future at risk from a war perspective, right? So, and then I'm sorry, I missed the chat. I need you guys to keep an eye on the chat too. We've got Stephen going south.
Okay,
I can't check him in with David's back, but I think there's an arrogance too about warfare,
Absolutely.
and you know that's been really apparent. David, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think that's why, you know, for me, we're not seeing this. You know, that's why the fireworks kind of thinking is the way that this is. It's about that, you know, what is that crescendo that he's going to do. Is he going to come out as being the peacemaker and get a Nobel Peace Prize? For negotiating a conflict that he started, which incidentally has happened with Israel conflict with Palestine before, with Abbas and people like that. So don't discount it at all as the possibility. And it's almost certainly going to be the thing that's actually going to give this peace talk the sugar that's going to do it. Pakistan is going to have to recommend, Pakistan had recommended Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize before. For that, or is he going to go a lot more out in a final kind of crescendo of tactical nuclear weapons, 31 of them, and that finishes the show? Whatever happens afterwards with your oil and the rest, your problem. But the fireworks show is finished now, and it's now time for you to go home and figure out what you want to do.
Yeah, the problem with the nuclear weapons show is the fallout from that. So one of the things about the dark triad personalities is they don't think through long-term consequences, right? So that the nuclear winter, that's not really good for all of us. So we've got going south. David, you're a man of nature. I saw some what do you call them? Pollinators flying around your head. I just hope they're not those horrible wasps that really hurt. But yeah, so just looking at the time, I mean, there's loads of stuff that I included. I mean, there's a lot going on. I don't feel good about where this is going at all. I can't see a way that this doesn't end in absolute tragedy that will impact the entire world.
I think the point here is not to fixate on what someone else might do in that way. I think what Andy was talking about earlier. Start reaching out with friends and people. You're gonna need their connections, if nothing else, to help support you along through with however it may turn out.
Yeah.
And so all the things it seems strange, but all the things Andy was saying earlier kind of has a whole new meaning. I guess that's what the richness about it is in what it offers in that way. Because when we think too much, when we get too much caught into what may happen and what it should be, we're taking that time away from ourselves to genuinely kind of address what we are, and that's how we can face, that's how we can prepare. There's the thing I came across. It was in an episode of a detective series, and this detective was reading about something that kind of the equal person said is sort of like don't wait for the crisis to happen, assume it's already here. That way what you do out of choice, maybe what you need to do out of necessity. And one of the things you do out of choice that's really important this time is to connect with people.
Yeah.
I think that's a lovely point. And where I am with this, I'm not as fatalistic as perhaps you are, Andrea, on this. I do think it'd be another Venezuela, but on a much bigger scale. I do worry about the ripples in the pond, and Russia is a great example of that. The second that he uses an excuse to remove oil sanctions, that was the massive flag in terms of what's happening there. And I think this conversation has uncovered a lot more. So we're not going, whatever happens, we're not going to come out of this as a world in a better place than we went into it. That's for sure. I am perhaps a little bit more optimistic about how it will end. I do think it will peter out. However, I get really torn by this, and I'd be really interested in everyone's opinions, because I get torn between our responsibility to speak up, to be part of the conversation, to create pressure, to create conversation, to build awareness of this, and the concept of focusing on what you can influence, on what you can do. So I think as someone who watches politics and gets frustrated by politics on a local as well as a national as well as a global basis, at the same time as someone who runs his own business that's impacted by all of these things and has to keep that head above water and has to keep that moving forward. I think I've got better over the last few years at focusing on what I can impact and not worrying so much about what I can't. But I feel guilty about it at the same time because I feel I should be a voice and I should have a say. I'm not providing an answer here. I'm providing more of a quandary and a question.
No, I think
but
it's
that's
a,
what
I think,
battle.
yeah, I think it's a really good question because I choose to be involved and think about and talk about things that I can't control. And with an attempt, what I'm trying to do is, if people are wanting to be part of the conversation or listen to it through this show and other formats, breaking it down, right? So when you see me as fatalistic, I'm not just looking at the end of this war. So boots on the ground, great. Those boots on the ground will be landing in temperatures that are well in excess of 50 degrees Celsius, and it will be an incredibly challenging situation for the soldiers, no matter what happens. But that's what's coming. When you listen to the economists, and maybe we can move into the economic section of it, right? There's all these celebrations about it, but the serious economists are saying this is going to go on for years. And in the shorter term, we've got energy shortages in Asia, where we're going through the extreme heat period. I think maybe next year it might be even worse because the El Nino would have done its damage. But the other week they were talking about wet bulb temperatures of 60 degrees Celsius in Bangkok and in Thailand. And they're telling people to try and turn off your aircon. If they run out of energy, you won't be able to turn on your aircon, and then you're going to be in real trouble. And then there's crops. So first of all, they're going to not have the fertilizer that the Middle East is providing in time to plant their crops. But then the other thing is the crops will be impacted by the environment based on an El Nino. So there'll be less food anyway. So when I talk about it, like, it's like, to me, this whole scenario, it's like the worst thing we could possibly do right now, based on where the world is from an environment perspective, from a geopolitical perspective. It's like these people who are leading us in the world, they just keep making the worst possible decision they could possibly make for the world right now. But if you don't want to get involved in it, if you want to get focused locally, if you got to, with my husband, we have an agreement. He just focuses on getting on with business, and I do this because we can't both be sunk in this, because then we wouldn't do anything, right? So everyone's got to make the choice for themselves. I know a lot of people are switching off and turning away. That's what I was talking about earlier with.
And there is a danger.
Social media. Yeah, they are. They're totally. They're just like, no, I can't do it.
And what's happened is that, I referenced earlier the last 10 years. This isn't just in the last week. We have craziness fatigue. We've got crisis fatigue. And I think more and more people are suffering with it. I was very vocal on social media about Brexit, and I noticed that a professional contact of mine had disconnected from me on Facebook as friends.
Yeah.
When I asked her why, she was like, "Oh, you're always angry on there," and that impacted me because that's not who I am. But that did change my behaviour, because I want to get that right balance of making the best of the life I have got while also being a responsible citizen. And I think, you brought up going south comment, which I'd spotted, and that tied into what you were saying. I'd sort of picked that up. The other thing is we have so many things to deal with, so many issues that divide us or that challenge us, that create risks for us in the future, that, going back to your question earlier about how you could use a relationship matrix in the more social sphere, the community sphere, we have to work out what everyone's strengths are and use our resources more effectively. Because what's happening is and you see it in the charity sector, where smaller charities, less headline grabbing charities, get overlooked and underfunded because everyone focuses. This was the criticism against Band-Aid and Live Aid and these mass ones, is that they detract from Comic Relief. They detract from smaller charities that aren't part of that. I'm rambling a bit, but you know, hopefully you get the point.
Yeah.
We're getting distracted by so many things that other challenges are getting left behind.
Yeah, I'm just checking. Is my
I want to add
my
something in there.
all right, David. Sorry, I was looking blue, so I was checking it out.
Yeah.
You've tried to share a dot. You've shared a dot. Oh, there you go.
The dot crazy afterwards. So one of the people who directly spoke out against all of this was the Pope, and kind of being American, he actually feels he's more able to speak directly, and has done that. And you know, the Trump administration doesn't like him for that. And in his Easter sermon, I think it's good to think about this. Is he's calling for us, for people generally, to counter this globalization of indifference. That's a phrase that's actually coined by the previous Pope, but which he picks up in this way. And he calls for prayer to come along. I think on Saturday, 6 p.m. Rome time, that's tomorrow, 6 p.m. Rome time, and it's going to be streamed in the Vatican channels, news channels. I guess there's a YouTube channel in it as well, and so on, that will go on through. And unless, of course, if you're in Rome, in which case show up at the St. Peter's Basilica and actually have it in person. This online versus in person thing again. But I think it's important to what we're saying here, because what the prayer is doing is more than about just hoping for the best in that sense. It's about actually helping us to be what we are. That's what that does. First of all, it actually engages ourselves with what we are in that way. And that allows it to come through in different ways in the situations we find in the businesses and messages that we may send to each other and all the rest of it. And it doesn't necessarily say this won't happen. It does change how we prepare ourselves for it.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to consider along. Can I just challenge a little bit on that, if that's okay, David? With as an atheist, with all due respect to your religious beliefs, I think if the Vatican's providing a place for people for reflection when they need it, great. But when you look at what's happening in this specific war, it's driven on both sides by religious fundamentalism. You know, the language of the Trump administration is that of Christian fundamentalism. We know that the Iran's regime, and as I mentioned earlier, I distinguish between Iran's regime and the Iranian people. Iran's regime is a religiously fundamentalist regime. If religious, let's say moderate religious leaders like the Vatican are going to have an influence, where they should have an influence is challenging that fundamentalism and challenging Christians in America to say this isn't Christian, this isn't Christianity.
And they do, and he does, and he has done that explicitly, and that's exactly what has brought on this.
I heard his comments. I heard his comments last week. Sorry.
But I think the point again here is that actually, when we do that, we set up differences. We set up, this is the religion, this is that, and this is the other. What will see us past this, the way to engage past the differences? Those differences will always be there because they were there back in the time of the Inquisition. They were back there in the time of the Crusades. They were there in, so many centuries back. What takes us forward is how we actually do engage with the differences rather than to point them out as opposite sides and separate them in that way. And that's where this comes in. That's where it comes in as to what we are. Are we the ones who wish to stand out and engage with the differences? Or do we point them out and say, they are the foundation of it, therefore we mustn't engage with it?
Yeah, so one of the ways I look at it, so David's a committed Catholic. I was one. I'm more aligned with you these days, Andy, but I have great respect, especially for the current Pope and the last Pope with their programs like Laudate Si, and I think they've got the most amazing opportunity to create great change in the world, and they're doing amazing things, right? the problem we have with religion isn't any particular religion, it's the extremists within religions. So Christian Zionism, Jewish Zionism, Hindu nationalism, Muslim extremists, even the bloody Buddhists have got extremists these days, right? So we've got extremists everywhere. Yeah, and they're running things, and that's what we need to get under control. And I think the Catholic Church is doing it. So one of the big pieces of story, big pieces of news was the Catholic Church is being threatened by the US. So, you know, this whole imperialism threat from the US to the rest of the world, you know, and we're seeing it. That's exactly what we're seeing. They're going to do what the hell they want because they're the superpower. But the Avignon papacy, I don't know if people know what that means. It's when the French court in it was 1309 to 1377. I think it was 7 popes had to live in France, in Avignon, rather than in Rome, and apparently it's an intimidation message. And I've seen some really good memes that there's a phone call. They're gonna send a nuclear bomb towards the Vatican and take it out, right? But the biggest story is how do we all feel? How do we all cope? How do we all deal with this time? And what we talk about every week is everyone's got to do what feels right for them. If you don't feel that you can get in the fight, like I won't get into fights with deniers. I couldn't care less, right? I see people engaging in those fights every single day. Couldn't care less. I just try and do a pulse of education every day. I'm sharing something. I try and do it in language that doesn't piss people off, so I don't get those phone calls, Andy. I try not to do the outrage because my belief is if you're constantly sitting in your emotions when you're communicating, you're not going to be an effective communicator. So you've got to take the emotions out. Just a pulse of information. This is what's going on, everyone. Pay attention to this. This is what's going on. So that's my job. So in your eyes, I'm an information person. Yeah. Other people are, do different things. So we've got, there's no one way to be, and there should be no guilt. And if you want to check out and just go and sit in a mountain and get stoned, you should be able to do that too. Right. So I think everyone's got to do what they've got to do at this time because it is an extraordinary time. And it's a time that we've all been predicting, but it's just come at us in a different way. And like Going South said, it's a diversion from the true crisis that the world is facing. And I think the El Nino, when it really kicks in, is going to prove that to be exactly right. And final thoughts on this one before we go to the economy, because I want to get a quick take on that.
I would just say it's not diverting from the climate crisis; it's adding to it. Talking about all these rockets we're firing into the sky. There's a climate impact of everything that we're doing at the moment.
Massive. All right, so I'm going to put Richard on stage.
Oh,
so every time Trump opens his mouth, the markets change, right?
Yes.
When you listen to serious economists, they say no matter what, this is not a short-term thing. This is a long-term thing, and yet we see Wall Street jumping up and down. There's so many people who are losing credibility, and these are people that shouldn't deserve credibility. But what's your take when you watch what's going on? There's an immaturity in the market that just I don't
know. Perhaps the word would be immaturity. I also think it's a lot to do with opportunism and nothing else. And it's quite hard to believe that the US stock market has now been up 7 days in a row, given what's going on. It's quite staggering. 7 days in a row is a long sequence. Only happens about once a year, twice a year, perhaps. But there is an enormous belief, I think, in the market that you should always buy the dip because it has worked for 20 years. And this is a meaningful dip, so we buy it. And then we shape a narrative around the fact that we have bought the dip, and hence it's not going to be too bad. I think that kind of thesis is colliding with the reality, because I think, largely speaking, economists have got it right. The economic impact of what's going on is going to be profound and long-lasting, because you're crashing into a physical reality that there isn't energy available. I believe the last tanker from Qatar with LNG arrived this week in Rotterdam. After this, there is nothing coming from Qatar to Europe in terms of gas. So you will be wholeheartedly reliant on Russian gas if you're European now. The oil prices that are being quoted in the press are either for WTI, which is American oil being deposited in one of 5 places, or is for European oil, Brent. Well, none of those are actually what's the problem here, because it's Saudi light or similar qualities. And they typically trade a couple of dollars away from those benchmarks. At the moment, those benchmarks are way under where physical oil is trading. Oil is trading more like $130 to $150 a barrel, which is $30 to $50 more than what's being quoted in the press as the price of oil. Hence, petrol prices and heating oil prices and diesel will keep going up. This is the physical reality. There isn't enough oil around. And you're running into enormous logistic problems because refineries are effectively tooled to process certain grades of oil. They're not just going to take any oil given the setting they have, and it takes weeks for them to reconfigure. So if they cannot get the Middle Eastern qualities delivered to basins in the Mediterranean or on the Atlantic coast, you are going to lose refining capacity. The Iranians know this very well, and that's why they hit the pipeline this week in Saudi Arabia and took out basically the big Saudi refinery. You are soon going to run into extreme pressures on kerosene, and we will see a lot more cancellation of flights because there isn't jet fuel around. That's the physical reality. How that does not translate into a full-blown recession is kind of puzzling to me, because I think you will see it. I think we are already in a full-blown recession. But the data will probably not show up until late May that tells us the economy is in free fall. That is the reality the stock market will be encountering over the next couple of weeks. And it's entirely possible that prices will stay high or highish, or whatever we want to label it as. But it can only stay high if we upgrade the potential of the future more, not the current reality that these companies are facing. So
what about fertilizer?
Call me a skeptical.
Yeah, but what about fertilizer? Because obviously
fertilizer
that's a big part
exactly
of it.
the same. Absolutely, it's exactly the same thing.
But there's also talk that Russia, Turkey, and China are all stopping their shipments of fertilizer to other countries, right?
Of course.
So it's not just the 30% out of the Gulf.
You're going to look after your own. You know, I need this fertilizer.
This is the same. I mean, you know, during 2022, when European gas prices went up, fertilizer manufacturers stopped producing because they know it can't be bought at those prices, and exports bans came into place. So you know, we had practice runs on this before. Incidentally, these 7 days of rallying has basically taken the US stock market to the level of the 27th of February before it all started. So it's worth kind of thinking about just what the stock markets may be versus the genuine sort of reality that you may face. And you know, what I think you get exactly is kind of like what Richard is saying is you have to stop looking at the market as what your life is going to be. And what actually happens is people end up seeing what their pensions, you know, kind of listed prices in that sense, and take comfort from that to their life. And that's a really dangerous habit to have. So, you know, get away from.
Can you explain that a bit more, David? What do you mean by that?
Well, we're April. We've just gone past April, so you know the tax year is over. We're going to start seeing kind of letters coming, especially in the UK where I am, that sort of says, you know, your pension contributions equates to this much and so on. You know, cut that down by 50% at the start. That's the reality of what it is. Two things happen in times like this: your liabilities go up and your assets go down. That's the thing to remember, basically.
Yeah. Oh, all right. We're not going to. I'm just looking at the time, and I want to give Joe a chance to talk about it. We've got the Hungary election this weekend, and Orban is obviously, hopefully, going to be defeated. There's some great pieces about how the Hungarian model was basically used in the US. They've just done a lot faster in the US. There's if he does win, it's because the way they've set it up means that the percentage that anyone else needs to win by is so high, it's almost impossible. But there is a belief that the guy, I can't remember his name, will win in the opposition. But artificial intelligence, loads of stuff going on there. There's some really good stuff about just some of the really weird things going on in AI. But there was a great piece in the New Yorker. I'll put it up when Joe has a chat, and it's talking about Sam Altman. And yeah, I just thought it was really interesting. Joe, what was your takeaway from the Sam Altman show? Show, yeah, it's kind of a show, right?
It was a show. Let's be honest.
Yeah,
That's exactly what it was.
Before I do a bit of the rundown about what I did in terms of research, just want to share a little holiday photograph of myself recently.
Nice.
Yeah. Now, the thing about this is that Sam Altman is just someone in terms of his track record. It's someone you can't really trust. I mean, that's the simple bottom line. Whether or not he's the person to drive the success of something that needs the kind of you need a really distorted sense of self and belief as well. I think he's also the right person for it. As in, like, if you look at the article, basically was referring to a lot of his history and what his past was, and in terms of whether or not he should have even been taken on board as a CEO based on what he was doing in the previous roles in previous companies. So in previous roles and previous companies, he's been he's had problems with staff boards and everybody else thinking that he's deceptive in the way that he portrays stuff. I think one of the companies that he was with is a British-based company where the CEO of the company had to fly all the way from the UK to New York just to fire him because up to that point he was calling himself some kind of a chairman of that particular organization as well. And so, you know, it came down to those kinds of shenanigans. So he's got a history of that in his past. But at the same time, you also have this combination which makes for the personality that can create the kind of activity like what's happening at ChatGPT for now. You know, that is it's a very tough combination. It really is the kind of thing that you think about as well when you refer to people like Steve Jobs, who were capable of doing incredible things and also at the same time being very cruel, and how they did things. They weren't always the best combination of people. You know, you wouldn't want them for a son, that sort of thing. And I think Sam Altman is in that category. And in terms of what he's done in terms of recent changes, and in terms of what has been found out about him as well. One of the big things that I think was a shock to everyone in OpenAI was the position that he had, that basically was initially that he had no commercial interest, or he did not have any commercial interest, I think, in the way OpenAI turned out. I mean, that was the way I think he testified to that in Congress. And then how it was accidentally found out that the way OpenAI had been structured is that its entire investment fund actually sort of belonged to him. Yeah. So it was one of those things where, yeah, it's like the CEO who says, I'm only taking $1, and then when you find out that deeper down and buried within the system is like, yeah, I'm only taking $1 of salary because I own the rest of it as well. So that kind of behavior would normally lead to the ouster of someone like that, but it did not, and it really is. You know, it's one of those things where I think there's so much vested in this. It's the old thing about too big to fail. So AI is that category, which is, you know, it really is too big to fail. They from a legal perspective, OpenAI went through this thing where they were fail safes that were built in legally into the system, and where they could legally have removed Sam Altman, and they did. And it was leverage in all the other forms that actually reversed that decision. And within the organization as well, it has to be said, is that there were also a lot of people who felt aligned with Sam Altman. People who may not have necessarily shared his real vision. They could have been people who were equally fooled as well, because for the people who've dealt with Sam Altman, when they can compare notes, the notes don't always line up. So he's somebody who's obviously done enough things to tell different stories to different people, and as it's been described, maybe not passing the line of criminality, but certainly someone who doesn't just say the truth, or at least is compelled to say the truth.
I just want to check in with Andy, because you had something else that you needed to go. Do you need to go?
Yeah, I would need to in the next few minutes.
All right. Okay. All right. I just don't want you to have to disappear. So the word sociopath turned up in the article a few times. And the other thing that sort of stood out for me is when you compared him to Steve Jobs, where that is a proven thing. Steve Jobs wasn't running AI. And that's the difference, like the most powerful technology that humanity's ever created, So that's the concern.
Yeah.
Can I just make an observation on this? Listening with a lot of interest to Joe, we seem to sort of go round in cycles with different charismatic or otherwise leaders, whether it's Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Altman, whoever it might be. And there's a fundamental problem that I think is becoming more and more obvious in the way our systems, our democracies, our societies are set up, and that is we are built in the West on values of aspiration, of celebrating individual achievement, and by doing so, we have not created any fail safes to stop the Lex Luthors of this world getting to that level. And that, we've been spending a lot of today talking about that in the political sphere, but actually it's happened in the business sphere. And it's always been there. You can go back to the magnets of the railroads and so forth over the years, banking magnets as well. But I don't know if those people, while they accumulated massive wealth, had the ability to impact society to the level these tech guys do now. And it's spiraled out of control, and we don't have a break because our values as a society do not allow us to put a break on them. Because we celebrate human achievement, therefore you're not allowed to shoot them down unless you're in the media and you get some photos that do it for you. You can't do it on the basis of the damage they're doing to our society, just on the damage they do in their private lives.
No, absolutely, 100%. Andy, if you want to jump out, just thanks so much for joining us and for staying the whole time. I knew you'd enjoy being on the show, but Joe, we totally agree with you. Joe, do you want to add anything more to that? Because I think it's...
No, I think in terms of we think about where the world is and impact and stuff like that, and you talk about the technology that really changed the world, right? It's like at the time, if you without knowing it at the time, by launching the smartphone, the iPhone, I guess Apple was in charge, had its hand on the thing that would really change society and really ruin us.
So it's the path, right?
So it's like the invention of nuclear technology. Really, sometimes maybe it had kind of a good idea behind it. I think AI also has a similar thing. It's designed to be
nuclear technology a bit different. I think it was it was really developed as a bomb. So
yeah. I mean, but it's about progressing the science and doing stuff and all that, taking it out there. I think it seemed like for Apple, for instance, it was seen as something quite benevolent when it first came out, and they did research. They had this nice sense of how when you interact with a touch screen, because of that feeling, they actually figured that the human brain responds with love and stuff like that. And it also has been weaponized. I mean, we're just very good at ruining a good thing. You know,
we sure are.
I mean, I think it's unintended consequences. I think that's the point of it. Is we don't actually consider sufficient about unintended consequences. I was what was that? Bring this up. I was writing this.
When you say we, David, it's not we. It's the people leading us.
No, I think it's all of us. I mean, back in time, St. Aquinas, 1200. Kind of time. He had this. Richard and I was writing about this in our book, The Unsustainable Truth, and we were talking about good versus evil. And the point was at that time, his philosophy had 4 criteria for good, and you had to meet them all. One of those criteria is the fact that the consequences of this, whether you intend it or not, have to be good. All of them, all of those consequences. That basically meant that no action can ever be considered as good. And that puts a rein to yourself to thinking, I'm going out to do this for sake of good. Because that motivation to do good is a hugely powerful rationalization for everything that you do. And those are the 3 conditions, or things like, is this thing intrinsically good? Kind of, is this for a good outcome? So if I bomb this place, it's for a good outcome or something. It's the way I do it in good through materials and those sort of things. But this last part, the fact that it's tacked on and is requirement for all 4 conditions, means that back in those days it was recognized that actually our actions cannot be good. They can at best serve us in what we do. But we forget that. It doesn't matter who we are, or what we are, or whether it's leaders or us individually. And if you think of our business world, our commercial world today, our commercial world attaches onto one of those 4s as the thing that is good, to rationalize it, and ignores all the rest. That's how you get DuPont creating microplastics.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So we've gone over time, of course.
We have.
I just want to just a couple of. We talked about the Godzilla El Nino. So it's not normal to be able to predict an El Nino at this stage, and often the predictions don't work out, and that's a physics thing. And David could better explain it. But they're pretty convinced that this is going to be one of the biggest and the largest El Nino episodes in the past have reset the global climate for decades afterwards. So that's why this one's an important one. We've got 3 cyclones coming through. I think it's 2 in the southern hemisphere, 1 in the northern hemisphere, just near the equator, which is unusual. And I just noticed a colossal one is going into New Zealand at the moment. So I'll put them in the weekend reads. There's plenty going on. Another piece that was in the Guardian is non-survivable heat waves are already breaching human limits. So I was a bit surprised to see this in the Guardian, where they were still talking about the 35 degrees temperature as the measure. So scientists dropped that down to 31. It was a few years ago now. I've seen people in the Northern Hemisphere commenting on this news saying that they're surprised by it. I'm not. It's really hot here, isn't it, Joe? Seeing wet bulb temperatures of 60 degrees Celsius in coming up in Thailand, I'm just so horrified by this. But the older generations obviously are most at risk, younger people too. I just really want to encourage people to educate yourself about wet bulb temperatures, what it means. It can also be called the heat index. You've always got a feels like temperature on your app where it tells you the actual temperature as well as feels like. Understand that that's the one you've got to be paying attention to. It's not enough to sit in the shade. If you start feeling woozy, work out what heat stroke is, what the symptoms are. I had it once in Thailand. It was horrible. I had to get to aircon as quickly as possible. So, what's keeping you guys distracted?
Well, I'm in Malaga, so that's keeping me distracted. It's
what you doing in Malaga?
I'm actually able to be here with all my kids, my family. So we're
Oh,
here
nice.
for holiday. It's quite
Easter.
rare. Yeah, because as adults, they've all got their own jobs and their own timetables. So that's actually quite a rare treat in that way. So it's been fantastic.
Nice. Yeah. Brilliant.
Well, for me, having spent Easter weekend in France, it's the wonderful game of pétanque. You cannot beat it. The pace of it, the discussions around it. It's a fabulous pastime, and it encourages you to do some serious thinking while you're playing as well as having a drink or two. It's a great game.
That sounds perfect. Yeah, the concept of slowing down, right?
Exactly. It has to be played slowly. You cannot rush it.
Yeah. So much of our life is not about slowing down. So yeah, Joe.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've had a chance to hear about or see the movie itself, Project Hail Mary. Have you heard anything about that?
Heard?
That sounds like the planet at the moment.
One of my lads watched it. I haven't seen it yet. Yeah, good.
Yeah, great movie. I think it was a fun movie. And then what I found myself recently doing is I've started on the audio book. So I'm a terrible reader in the usual sense, but I'm embarked on this 14-hour journey of listening to the audiobook. Which is actually really well put together with some very interesting things. So if you watch the movie, you'll enjoy it some, and then if you listen to the audiobook, you'll hear some even bigger stories. And I actually found myself thinking a lot about you, Andrea, in terms of, and I'm sure the rest of you as well would find some of the ideas in there quite interesting, because there's a basis to the science that they employ on in terms of what's happening on Earth, the big problem that they have. That they're all working together to solve, and then of course there's a whole science fiction of it all. So it involves some interstellar travel and things like that, but all well motivated. I think you'll enjoy it. Interstellar. It's been compared to, or at least described as Interstellar meets ET, and I think there's something in that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Going south. Have you played it, Richard, in Copenhagen?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right.
No.
I think I thought one of the founding members of Extinction Rebellion, if I got that right. Going south, right? Okay. So I finished the TV series, as well as Deadlock, the second one. Thank you so much for introducing me to that. That is just so my bag. The other Bennett sister, have you guys seen that being advertised about?
I've seen the advertise, yeah.
I haven't worked out how to watch it yet, but it kind of got me into a bit of a sort of a classics, where I was watching like movies like Pride and Prejudice, and it was quite lovely. But last night I started watching a series called Rooster with Steve Carell, and it's I'm only a couple of 3 episodes in, but very funny, very clever. I think it was on HBO Max, but sort of a middle-aged man sort of going through all sorts of personal crises, but kind of the shrinking kind of level of intelligence and humor. So it's called Rooster, or The Rooster, but I think it's Rooster. But I think I can hear a rooster or a chicken somewhere around David. But yeah, so that might
there's a bird in the background that's quaking. I'm not sure what kind of bird it is, but it's definitely quite loud. But
we've heard some lovely birds. All right, everyone. Thank you. Thank
you very much.
Lots to cover as always. We didn't get through everything.
Indeed. Some good discussions today.
We're not going to be here next week because my younger son Jax is graduating from school, and
big day.
I've got to be
big
there
day.
for that. So, but we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Indeed.
And hopefully the world's still here at the end, right?
There is some
hope. We'll be here. In what form is the question?
Exactly. All right. Bye.